Welcome to meeting number 34 of the Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Thank you for everybody being not just on time, but early. We can get underway. Thank you to we have 4 witnesses joining us today. We have Clean Energy Canada, represented by Dr. Mark Zacharias, Navius Research Inc., represented by Michael Wolonetz, S&T Squared Consultants Inc., represented by Don O'Connor, and the Pembina Institute, represented by Bora Plumtree. And of course, we have Mr. Lloyd appearing today, replacing Mr. Surrey. So thank you, Mr. Longfield, for joining us today, and special thanks to all of our witnesses. Some of you may have done this before, but in case you haven't, the process is each witness group will be given up to 5 minutes, emphasis on up to make opening remarks. After all of the witnesses have finished their opening remarks, I'll turn the floor over to committee members who will then be asking questions. You have all tested your headsets and your sound devices. You have translation services available to you. You're encouraged to and welcome to speak in either official language, and you will be asked questions in both. On that note, thank you again for coming, and I'll turn the floor over to, I'll start with Clean Energy Canada with Dr. Zacharias.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Mark Zacharias, and I'm a special advisor to Clean Energy Canada, a climate and clean energy think tank at Simon Fraser University. I am based in Victoria, BC. I will be speaking today on how Canada can position itself to become a clean hydrogen leader through growing domestic supply and demand that in turn sets Canada up as a clean hydrogen exporter. Canada is already a top 10 global hydrogen producer. However, nearly all of Canada's hydrogen is produced from natural gas, where carbon dioxide is allowed to escape into the atmosphere, where it contributes to global warming. This form of hydrogen production is termed gray hydrogen. Current emissions from global industrial hydrogen production, used mostly in refineries and the fertilizer industry, amount to 830 million tons of carbon dioxide per year. For comparison, Canada's entire economy emits just over 700 million tons annually. In contrast, clean hydrogen is produced without or with very few greenhouse gas emissions and is made in 2 different ways. Green hydrogen is produced from zero-emission electricity using electrolysis. Blue hydrogen is made from natural gas in conjunction with carbon capture and storage. Both green and blue hydrogen are valid climate solutions, and Canada is well positioned to produce both types at scale. Clean hydrogen has a number of unique advantages as a climate solution, particularly in sectors that are the most difficult to decarbonize and where alternatives are limited. These are often referred to as the toughest third of emissions. These include trucking, shipping, and the production of steel, cement, and fertilizer. Canada is among a small group of countries with the highest potential for exporting clean hydrogen, thanks to an electricity grid that is currently 83% non-emitting, sufficient access to fresh water, which is required for electrolysis, as well as abundant natural gas resources. The International Energy Agency cites a growing international consensus that clean hydrogen will play a key role in the world's transition to a sustainable energy future. Bloomberg NEF, meanwhile, estimates that clean hydrogen could meet up to nearly a quarter of the world's energy demand by 2050. Canada is in the game, and last week's announcement by Air Products Canada on a $1.3 billion investment in a blue hydrogen energy complex in Alberta is an excellent start. However, Canada's long-term hydrogen advantage is most likely production not from natural gas, but for production from zero-emission electricity. The cost of producing green hydrogen is projected to be on par with blue as early as 2030 and cheaper thereafter. Green hydrogen is expected to be cheaper than natural gas by 2050. Canada's ability to generate abundant and low-cost renewable energy is a significant competitive advantage. So what must Canada do to seize the hydrogen advantage? First, replace fossil fuels with new hydrogen-based applications, particularly in sectors that are the most difficult to decarbonize and where alternatives are limited. Steel and cement manufacturing are excellent examples where hydrogen can replace fossil fuels. Second, use clean hydrogen to decarbonize natural gas utilities, which are increasingly setting targets or facing regulations requiring that they blend increasing amounts of renewable gases, which it could include biomethane and hydrogen. Currently, up to 15 to 20% of the blend can be hydrogen with little modification to existing pipeline systems and domestic appliances. Third, reduce the emissions intensity of current gray hydrogen production by making it blue through carbon capture and storage or replacing it with green hydrogen. Fourth, use hydrogen to store energy. As we decarbonize our energy systems using variable sources of electricity, there is a growing need to store this clean energy for use during all hours of the day and something hydrogen can be used for. To summarize, Canada has tremendous opportunities to build and participate in the hydrogen economy. Thank you for the invitation to speak today, and I look forward to your questions.
Two things. First, thank you very much. Second, my apologies for mispronouncing your name. And I'll move on to our next witness, Navius Research. I'm hesitant to try to pronounce your name again because I'll probably get it wrong as well. You're on mute.
There we go. I thought you'd have another go with a tricky last name. My name is Michael Wallenitz. I am a partner, senior analyst, and consultant with Navius Research. We are a Vancouver-based energy economic consultancy, and primarily our work involves producing forward-looking analyses where we simulate how government policy, technology, and energy markets and costs will affect greenhouse gas emissions and the economy in general. Our work spans all sectors of the economy, all energy consumption, all emission sources, and all potential greenhouse gas abatement actions. I'll be speaking somewhat more briefly, and I think focusing more on the renewable and biofuel side of things. I think there is a significant opportunity for renewable low carbon biofuels in Canada. And to get there, it's critical to have policies that create long-term and durable signals for the consumption of these low carbon and renewable fuels. In order to get to some meaningful level of production, there needs to be very large investments, and these will only happen if they can be significantly de-risked by ensuring that there'll be some market for the product that they're producing. In terms of cost and benefits of these fuels, our work consistently shows us that these fuels will cost more than conventional fossil fuels, but the benefit is that there are new sectors and commodities that create new economic development and jobs in Canada, and there are significant opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Regarding economic activity and job creation, if we're focusing on the biofuel side of things, there is significant potential for job creation, especially in rural parts of Canada, as it may involve additional collection of forestry harvest residues or agricultural residues, as well as processing within rural areas. That being said, from this specific green economy sector, we see a lot of jobs, but not such a quantity that it would completely offset the jobs related to the current conventional fossil fuel industries. Regarding the potential for net reduction in Canada's greenhouse gas emissions, there's substantial abatement potential from low carbon renewable fuels, especially when we're talking about advanced biofuels produced from woody or grassy feedstocks. That being said, it's not a silver bullet. We're talking about a silver buckshot approach here. So it's going to have to occur in conjunction with numerous other abatement opportunities. So that would include electrification, energy efficiency, as well as other low carbon fuels like hydrogen. We see a pretty healthy niche that could be occupied by biofuels. We do a lot of work now forecasting how Canada's economy and energy system evolves when meeting legislated and announced targets, as well as how it evolves as we trend towards a net zero emissions future. And we see a persistent and ongoing demand for energy dense fuels that could be used notably for transportation like trucking, marine, and aviation, as well as in industry. Biofuels, notably those produced from residues that could be sustainable and also give a real greenhouse gas reduction, could occupy a healthy niche of our energy system, something on the order of 15 to 25%, depending on the extent of energy consumption and the extent of feedstock production. That being said, it requires careful management to ensure that the bioenergy system is actually giving a real and substantial net reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So you need careful management to ensure that you're not depleting stocks of soil carbon. For example, not degrading soils and not resulting in additional deforestation. As I mentioned earlier, biofuels may be complemented by hydrogen in terms of other low carbon fuels, and certainly will act in concert with energy efficiency and electrification using renewable energy consumption. That being said, I am somewhat less optimistic and more uncertain about the future of hydrogen. I certainly see a role interacting with intermittent renewable solar and wind electricity generation and potentially blue hydrogen. Although I don't necessarily see it as an outright shift to a full hydrogen economy in the future where hydrogen is cheaper than current energy sources. Yeah, thanks for having me participate, and that's all I'll say right now.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay, moving on to Mr. O'Connor from S&T Squared Consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Don O'Connor. I'm the president of S&T Squared Consultants. Our client base is international, and so far this year we've had clients from Canada, the United States, Europe, and Southeast Asia. Clients include investment bank, multinational refining companies, alternative fuel producers, agri-food processors, associations representing agri-food processors and biofuel producers, technology developers, and some large fuel users. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I'm a registered professional engineer in British Columbia and Ontario, and I'm also a member of the Society of Automotive Engineers. I've co-authored 7 peer-reviewed papers, mostly related to greenhouse gas emissions from alternative fuels, and I'm a co-inventor on 7 patents, most of them related to processes for cellulosic ethanol. I have 40 years of experience with alternative transportation fuels, first as a marketer, then as a producer, and for the past 20 years as a consultant. I've worked with many of the provinces when they introduced their renewable fuel programs between 2002 and 2012, and my experience covers ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, natural gas, methanol, propane, and hydrogen. For the past 20 years, I've been the developer of the GH Genius Life Cycle Assessment Model. This model focuses on the GHG emissions of transportation fuels. It has over 200 pathways for producing and using conventional and alternative fuels, and it is specified currently in regulations in BC, Alberta, and Ontario. And Quebec has proposed using this model for their proposed renewable fuel requirements. The model is used around the world, and through our development and use of the model, we've acquired more real-world data on the performance of alternative production fuels and processes than anyone else in Canada. So based on my experience, I'd like to make 3 observations for your consideration. So first, reductions in GHG emissions now are worth more than the reductions from 10 years from now. We should stop thinking about percent GHG emission reductions in 2030 or 2040, and instead focus on looking at the cumulative GHG emissions between now and 2030 or 2040. In other words, the time for action is now, not 10 years from now. It's a lot more complex. So my second point is that it's a lot more complex and takes a lot longer to replace fuels and vehicles than it does just lower the carbon intensity of fuels used in existing vehicles. And I saw that over and over again in the 1980s and 1990s when the company I was working for was introducing some of these alternative fuels. And the third point is that many of the claims that companies and organizations are making about achieving net zero emissions are being made with the focus only on making the fuels and not on using the fuels. Net zero crude oil production only addresses 10 to 15% of the life cycle emissions of gasoline or diesel fuel. On the other hand, technology to produce net zero renewable fuels on a full life cycle basis is available today and can conceivably be implemented. I'm here to answer any questions you have on the production and use of alternative fuels and the GHG emission performance of the various alternatives. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Okay, and last up we have Mr. Plumtree.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to speak today. My name is Bora Plumtree. I'm a senior analyst with the Pembina Institute in the Federal Policy Program, and I'm really excited to take this opportunity to speak about the need and the opportunity to facilitate greater supplies and consumption of low carbon and renewable fuels in Canada. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose presence here in what is also known as Ottawa reaches far back in time. So I'll focus my comments on two areas. First, on the urgent necessity of accelerating the shift toward low carbon and renewable fuels, particularly for transportation. Second, on the regulatory powers of the federal government and of the contribution that the judicious exercise of those powers could make toward the objective that I would submit unites the whole committee in conducting the present study, which is to say a vision of a net zero society in which affordable clean fuels proliferate throughout our country's energy systems and beyond to our partners in international trade. To me, this is a praiseworthy vision that would see us strategically shift our energy economy into areas where investors are already going, positioning us to compete in the rapidly growing global market for clean energy, and enabling us to finally meet our responsibility to eventually eliminate our ongoing contribution to the worsening effects of climate change. Canada can and must do much more to decarbonize its transportation sector, which remains heavily reliant on petroleum-based fuels. Our emissions of greenhouse gas from mobile combustion sources remain stubbornly high, having grown 54% since 1990 and 16% since 2005, which is our base year for climate target setting. Today, transportation is our second highest emitting economic sector, responsible for 1/4 of our national GHG emissions. In most provinces and in all territories, it is the highest emitting sector. These figures are drawn from the Federal Department of the Environment, and what they tell us is that right now, despite recent policy innovations on a biophysical level, we're not headed in the right direction. So whether in pursuit of our nearer term emissions reduction target for 2030 or in pursuit of our longer term aspiration to build a net zero society, the decarbonization of fuels must be a key element of our strategy for transportation. Vehicle-focused policies are necessary too, but they're not sufficient. To decarbonize the whole system, government must pay attention to the core energetic component of mobility, namely fuels. So how do we do this? Electrification appears increasingly likely to solve the problem of emissions from passenger road transport. But given the deep uncertainty about which fueling solutions will propel medium and heavy duty freight vehicles in the long term, we still need to approach this challenge in a way that provides a clear investment signal while remaining technology neutral. Thankfully, we have a policy coming into place in the form of the Clean Fuel Regulations, sometimes still called the Clean Fuel Standard, which will fundamentally reorient the regulatory paradigm for fuel markets across Canada around the criterion of life cycle carbon intensity. This reorientation is long overdue, and I was really pleased to see this type of policy approach, a low carbon fuel standard, also recently endorsed by the leader of the official opposition. This is an important contribution because it helps provide certainty about the path forward for both the obligated and voluntary participants in the market this policy will create. Certainty and risk minimization for investors is essential to making progress on both technology and deployment. And the best way to minimize risk is by means of a regulatory program such as the Clean Fuel Regulations, which acts effectively as a non-subsidy transfer from high carbon to low carbon fuel producers. In other words, without resorting to public spending, the policy will shift capital flows on an ongoing basis to companies that can accelerate our transition to net zero. Subsidies, by contrast, of course, have a habit of going away. Another essential virtue of the Clean Fuel Regulations is that they enable a portfolio-based approach to decarbonizing the national fuel supply. Many models have attempted to project what the energy system might look like by mid-century, and many scenarios of our energy future remain possible. But where the models converge is on the basic finding that we will need a portfolio of cleaner fuels options in order to achieve our climate goals. Increasingly stringent clean fuel regulations will enable the cost-effective build-out of this diverse portfolio without government having to pick winners. So whether your interests, or perhaps more properly those of your constituents, is to promote one type of low-carbon fuel or another, the most important aspect from both a business and a climate perspective is to ensure a stable investment environment for projects to get done. There's a virtuous circle to enable between financial dependability and emissions reductions. A properly administered clean fuel regulation will provide the financial architecture for accelerating direct investments in the market-ready solutions and promote innovation in the more expensive, earlier stage technologies that need to be scaled up. Thank you. I'll stop there, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Plumtree. I think this is an all-time first. We started the meeting early and every witness came in under time, so bodes well for the rest of the meeting. Okay, so let's move into first round of questions at 6 minutes, starting with Mr. Patzer, who I believe is in the committee room.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I'm going to start with the Pembina Institute. Any kind of natural resource project is intimately connected with the environment, and we all know that managing our environmental impacts can be complex if we're trying to make sure our actions result in a net benefit. Again, no matter what kind of project we're pursuing, whether it's alternative or conventional forms of energy. So I'm just wondering, do you share the concern we've heard from others about land use when it comes to an increased demand for biofuels?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Patzer. I certainly do believe that we need to take sustainability considerations into account when it comes to biofuel production. Mr. O'Connor will be able to speak to that in depth, I'm sure. But what I would say is that I would agree with what Mr. Walnitz said in his comments, which is to say that there is a true opportunity for Canada to take advantage of the fact that we have a natural resource base and a plethora of potential feedstocks for different biofuel production processes that we are not yet fully taking advantage of, and that this can be something that Canada can pursue in a way that is sustainable. And I do believe that the Department of the Environment is taking steps to ensure that that type of approach is being hardwired into the regulation.
Okay, and I'm just going to maybe just go out to Mr. O'Connor then. Do you want to answer that as well then?
Sure. So I think there's no question that agriculture in Canada is quite sustainable. Canada has been tracking a number of sustainability metrics related to agriculture since the 1980s. And every 5 years, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada put out a comprehensive report on the environmental performance that is, you can't find a report of that quality anywhere else in the world. One of the things that has happened is that we've seen increasing yields of crops, particularly those that are used for biofuels. And at the same time, we see stagnant or declining demand for some of these crops from some other traditional uses. So feed going into livestock is lower today than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay, I'm just going to kind of elaborate on that a little bit here, because one of the other stakeholders that I've been meeting with and hearing from as well are talking about sensitive grasslands being broken up. We're also seeing ranch land being lost and converted for people to chase this $20 and $22 canola. We know that price may or may not, the markets are always up and down, right? There's the volatility associated with it, but people are, either way, they're busting up grasslands in order to try to grow some of these biofuel stocks. So I'm just curious to know, do you have any reports, or have you done any looking or research into the effects that this may or may not have long term?
So the information that Canada has and reports in its national inventory report shows no change in grasslands. However, they do admit that Canada does not have a perfect system for monitoring changes in grasslands. But overall, cropland in Canada has been declining for the last 15 or 20 years, similar to the declines in agricultural land that we see in the rest of the developed world.
Yeah. I mean, where I'm from. I've seen a lot of people that get out of ranching and go into farming instead, right? And we're looking at the sequestering power of ranch land, and the long-term benefits that it has. It's I would say it's a bit of a shame that that's happening. We've seen documentaries like Guardians of the Grasslands outline very clearly the benefits that our grasslands do have. But I'm going to move on to another point here. Clean Energy Canada here. I got a question for you. I guess staying with you, Mr. O'Connor. I've seen some concerning numbers for how if we aren't careful and strategic with an energy transition and how we grow new industries, we can see other types of damage done. As of 2019, the International Renewable Energy Agency calculated that solar goals for 2050, consistent with the Paris Accords, would result in old panel disposal more than doubling the tonnage of global plastic waste. The IRENA, same agency, also forecasted massive jumps in mining for minerals in higher demand. Silver would jump 250% and indium by 1,200%. Also, building one wind turbine, another report that I've read, requires 900 tons of steel, 2,500 tons of concrete, and 45 tons of non-recyclable plastic. And when we look at the disposal of what they're doing with that, quite frankly, it's just ending up being buried in the ground. There's lots of examples above and beyond that as well, too. I'm just curious to know, because we were talking a lot about how we're going to electrify as a way of getting zero emission fuel sources or energy to be able to create fuel sources. But have we looked at what the unintended consequences are going to be when we're burying wind turbine blades in the ground, the amount of steel, the amount of concrete that goes into these products, when we're looking at GHG life cycles? Are we looking at that, or what are we doing with this?
Sure, that's a good question. I'll go first. So yes, the transition to a net zero world is going to require massive increases in the metals, minerals, materials to build all of the infrastructure required. So what happens when that infrastructure gets to its end of life and end of life cycle? And again, because it's a fairly new industry and it's scaled up so quickly, these questions are just being tackled. So for example, there's now a company in Texas that recycles wind turbine blades and reuses them back into materials. Both California and BC are looking at extended producer responsibilities for solar panels. A number of countries in Europe are looking at end-of-life considerations around all of the assets and infrastructure required for basically solar, wind, and other types of generation. So absolutely, Canada is a leader in sustainable mining through IRMA and some of the other processes in terms of trying to export those globally as around, sustainable sources of mining. So there is some catch-up necessary and some catch-up to do, but I would think that Canada, particularly a lot of the provinces, are already on this.
All right, thank you. Thanks. Okay, we'll move on now to Mr. Weiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank all the witnesses for joining today and just all the breadth of knowledge that they bring to the discussion and the study that we're doing. My first question will be to Clean Energy Canada. In your remarks and also in your report on how hydrogen can deliver climate solutions and clean energy competitive for Canada, you note that studies indicate the cost of green hydrogen is going to drop by 64% by 2040, while blue hydrogen is going to rise by almost that same amount, mostly due to changing natural gas prices. And as a result, you mentioned that green hydrogen could be cost competitive within a decade. And in this study so far, we've heard almost unanimous feedback that Canada should be focusing both on blue and green hydrogen production at the same time to be able to build out some of the common infrastructure that's going to be needed sooner, particularly with where the prices are right now relatively with those two. So if these market projections hold true going forward, how should Canada be approaching its strategy on hydrogen today?
Well, it should be looking at both. Blue hydrogen obviously is more cost competitive and probably will likely be cost competitive for at least another decade. Having said that, if you look at the US's recent announcement under the Biden administration, they're looking at green hydrogen at about $1.50 US a kilogram within the next decade. That would outcompete blue hydrogen as it's currently costed in Canada. So I think there's a two-path track here. One is where we do have natural gas processing assets, and we have uses for natural gas that are near natural gas sources. We should be scaling up blue hydrogen, but also looking at the long term. term. So Western Australia, just to give you an example, they have a hydrogen minister, and they are looking at 100 gigawatts of production of clean hydrogen, that's green hydrogen, which already has contracts for sale in Japan right now. And that's within the next 10 years. So 100 gigawatts just is basically 100 Site Cs. So that's the scale of hydrogen that's coming on stream. Germany has allocated $13 billion Canadian to its hydrogen strategy. Portugal is 10 billion and France is 7. So there's going to be an enormous competition for clean hydrogen. But again, Canada does have an advantage in the short term because of our ability to produce blue hydrogen. And also too, is we have a lot of industries that actually use hydrogen and it could be cleaned up. We have a very large fertilizer industry, a very large chemical industry as well as we do develop steel and cement.
Well, thanks for that. And you know, we've talked about a few of the kind of key overarching mechanisms we have: the price on pollution, the clean fuel standard, as ways of having that certainty for business, and not necessarily picking winners. It does seem that many of these other countries that you're mentioning are kind of trying to pick hydrogen as a winner in the low carbon fuel space in the future. We do have a $1.5 billion fund for these types of fuels. But what more would you say is necessary on top of the structures that we already have in place and the strategy in that fund to really allow Canada to be able to fully take advantage of some of the economic opportunities in hydrogen going forward?
I think Canada is on the right track. It's done the right thing around identifying hubs, because what will be appropriate for Alberta and Saskatchewan to feed their industries will be different for Quebec. Quebec, with its large hydro capacity, will have cheap electricity and the ability to produce green hydrogen, which could in turn be exported to Europe. The Western Canada might be a little bit different. So I think that's been good. What's missing on the Canadian national stage is there is a Canadian hydrogen strategy. However, it basically is 141 pages and it's full of recommendations rather than concrete actions. And those concrete actions actually have to be attached to funding. And the 1.5 billion is for a whole suite of low carbon fuels. That needs to be ramped up if we are going to be competitive with other jurisdictions, including Europe, Asia, and the States.
Thank you. And in the same report I mentioned earlier, you also note the potential of synthetic fuels, where hydrogen could be blended or combined with carbon-based fuels to create new fuels. And one of the examples that you mentioned in the report is Carbon Engineering, which happens to be a company based in my riding that unfortunately I don't think we're going to have time to welcome in this committee before we rise for the summer. But I was wondering, what role do you see synthetic fuels playing in Canada's low carbon future, as well as fuels directly produced through direct air capture?
I think that's going to be a little ways out, and it's going to be a much more risky venture than other low carbon fuels that we've talked about on this call today. It may come to fruition at some point in the next year, but it really will depend on the price of electricity and availability of electricity for direct air capture.
Thank you. Well, next I want to go to Mr. O'Connor for a question. You know, in your third observation, you mentioned that many of the claims are for net zero are only looking at the production side, not the scope 3 side, which of course is very important. But you mentioned that net zero life cycle fuels are available now. And which of those net zero life cycle fuels right now do you see as playing that we should focus most on in terms of short-term measures?
I think there's two. First of all, ethanol, where you can capture the CO2 that comes off the fermentation and inject it underground. So carbon capture and storage. So that's worth 30 grams per megajoule. And we have ethanol plants today in the low 40 grams per megajoule on a full life cycle basis. The other major factor is the fuel that's used, natural gas. So renewable natural gas or biomass combustion can get those plants down to zero. The other fuel that's got a lot of interest in Canada and in the United States is something called renewable diesel. So it's made from vegetable oils or animal fats. It has a low GHG emissions, probably in the order of 20 to 25 grams per megajoule. Again, about more than half of that is due to the hydrogen that's used in the process. And I know that there are companies that are looking at doing this, that are looking at two things. One, carbon capture and storage again for the hydrogen. Secondly, those plants also produce some co-products that are biogenic in nature and can be used to produce the hydrogen. And so using the biogenic components can get the hydrogen part of it down to zero. And again, you can still do the carbon capture on that biogenic CO2 to get the full life cycle down to zero without looking at some of the other things that are going to happen in the future with better farming practices, the use of renewable fuels in the farming practices, all of that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Weiler. Okay, on to Mr. Simard.
Merci, James.
Thank you. Before beginning, I would have a question for Mr. Zacharias. I want to make sure that he can hear me. Can he hear do you hear the interpretation? Great. Before asking the question, I'd like to indicate what my opinion is. I have the impression that the strategy that was developed or proposed by the government on hydrogen, it tries to find new markets for the oil and gas industry, and this bothers me. First question, can you answer this in a short, succinct fashion? In your opinion, can we qualify hydrogen from gas or oil as being clean hydrogen?
Thank you for the question. I think the answer to that is currently yes. If you look at last week's announcement from Air Products Canada, they are planning to use carbon capture and storage and offsetting to get to 95% carbon removal from the project. So that is sufficient. And even 2 years ago, when we were looking at blue hydrogen, if we saw 80 to 90% carbon removal, we thought that that was good. So the technology has improved.
Merci. Je vous dis ça.
Thank you. I'm saying this because I read an article this week written by a professor emeritus in Montreal, and indicating that the strategies for carbon capture right now are at an experimental phase and that these procedures are extremely dangerous. So I'm not sure if, according to your knowledge, you know anything about this, but I saw a statistic that was quite horrible. To produce 10 million tons of hydrogen involves 100 million tons of CO2 that would be stocked. So is this technology sufficiently developed to be, one, safe, and two, profitable?
Sure, I'll speak to both those questions. The first one is, yes, Canada has been sequestering carbon dioxide underground for many years. Shell's Quest project in Alberta has been up and running since 2018, and I believe it's already sequestered several megatons of CO2 underground. Canada has favorable geology, both in terms of offshore basalt formations on both coasts, as well as depleted oil and gas reservoirs, both in terms of Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, and possibly off of Newfoundland and Labrador as well to store carbon dioxide. So Canada does have the potential to store a lot of CO2 underground. Second, on the economics, currently blue hydrogen is expensive. It's several times more expensive right now than gray hydrogen, so hydrogen without carbon capture and storage. However, as technologies improve and costs scale down, it will be cost competitive, I think. But again, green hydrogen may be more cost competitive in the next decade.
Merci. Donc, rapidement, vous avez...
Thank you. So earlier on, you indicated that the government should have a strategy for hydrogen, and you raised a statistic that was quite interesting. You say that in 2030, green hydrogen will be cheaper than natural gas. And I believe I heard something that you said earlier, that in the next 10 years, the US wanted to go towards green hydrogen. You spoke about Australia and France. In this strategy, shouldn't the federal government rather try to support a green hydrogen before supporting blue or gray hydrogen to have access to developing markets internationally?
It's a good question. My answer to that is Canada's competitive advantage right now is in both green and blue hydrogen. And by using blue hydrogen right now, it does two things. One is it gets Canada ready for a green hydrogen revolution and to scale up its production. And two, it's a way to transition a workforce from natural gas and oil and gas industry through into blue hydrogen, possibly into clean or green hydrogen at some future date.
À court terme, selon vous,
Over the shorter term, in your opinion, in this hydrogen strategy, what should be implemented by the government over the short term?
Over the short term right now, I think the government is doing a good job on the hydrogen hubs and getting those established. I think more funding would be required for Canada to really understand the export opportunities to scale up production. We need actually a jurisdictional review that looks at all of our potential competitors around what are our competitive advantages. Canada produces a lot of electricity, some of which is at times we don't need, and that electricity could be used to produce green hydrogen. And so I think more work is required. The federal hydrogen strategy is a very good first step, but I think the recommendations in that strategy need to be turned into actions that can be moved forward quickly.
Thanks, Mr. Simard. I think we'll have to stop there. Okay, on to Mr. Cannings.
Well, thank you, and I'd like to thank all the witnesses, but I think I will continue with Mr. Zacharias along those same lines. My first question is about blue hydrogen. It seems that most of the carbon capture and storage in North America involves basically enhanced oil recovery, pumping carbon dioxide underground into those depleted oil and gas formations, but specifically to produce more oil. And I just wondered if you would comment on that. I've heard some negative comments about using that strategy to produce blue hydrogen.
Yes. So enhanced oil recovery is when carbon that's pulled out of blue hydrogen production is then in turn transported to an oil reservoir and used to increase and recover oil out of the reservoir. That is happening right now, and much of the carbon coming down the Alberta carbon trunk line is used for that purpose. Now that's the short term, and I think there's a number of studies that have been published. I don't have them offhand right now that shows the sort of overall carbon balance of that activity. Can't remember what it was. But I would like to say, though, that that's only one small portion of carbon capture and storage. If you look at BC's offshore, we have very favorable basalt formations, and Ocean Networks Canada, based out of the University of Victoria, is looking at potentially next summer going out and doing some pilot carbon capture and storage, where basically the carbon is mineralized into basalt formations. The east coast of Canada has very similar geology as well. So there are some opportunities for carbon capture and storage that haven't yet been built out to scale that don't involve EOR, or enhanced oil recovery.
Yeah, and that's what I've been hearing as well. And maybe you can also comment on the project off Norway that seems to be one of the big projects on carbon capture that is gearing up to take a lot of carbon produced in European industries and store it underground off the shores of Norway in these geological formations without enhanced oil recovery. And they feel that enhanced oil recovery is just sort of oil business 101. We need to do it without that to to really get the impact for the climate action?
Yeah, so Norway is doing some pilot projects right now. What they're planning to do is they're planning to take carbon dioxide produced from concrete plants, so move that by pipeline off to disused oil platforms, and then use the oil platforms to inject the carbon dioxide into the depleted oil formations. So it's not at scale right now. They're still looking for capital, but it may be an opportunity to store carbon offshore. I'd also note that Norway isn't the only European country looking at this. A number of the countries kind of in and around the Denmark down to northern France are looking at the same opportunity.
Well, thank you. And I just wanted you to go on to expand on your comments about using hydrogen in various industries. You know, we've heard about it being used in heavy transportation, but you mentioned, I think, fertilizer, cement, chemical industry. Just perhaps expand on that, how hydrogen could be used in that.
Sure. I mean, Canada has a number of uses, potential uses for hydrogen. In the industrial sector, it can be used either as a feedstock in terms of chemical production, methanol, et cetera, and fertilizers. It can also be used as a heat source for steel, cement, and other reactions that currently use coal or natural gas. That's the industrial space. We've talked briefly at the committee around it can be used as a fuel for transportation, either through use of a fuel cell. It can be blended with diesel, or it can be direct injected into a diesel engine. And there's a company in BC now that's just set up called Hydra Energy, which does exactly that. It can be ejected into the natural gas grid that currently exists, currently at percentages of up around 20% to help decarbonize the existing natural gas grid. And it can be used for pretty much any use you can think of that requires energy. It can also be used as a grid scale storage solution for renewable energy. So when the wind blows and the sun shines, California is doing this with the LA Department of Water and Power. So what they're doing is they're taking overproduction from renewable power during the day, storing it as hydrogen, and then they're running it through a fuel cell at night to produce electricity. So many uses.
Well, thank you. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have?
You've got about 50 seconds.
Okay, well, I think I'll just move to Mr. O'Connor for an explanation, and I think Mr. Weiler kind of touched on this, but talking about the life cycle analysis of the net zero impacts of different fuels. And you made a comment about the crude oil analysis at 10% or something. I just missed the details on that. I wonder if you could repeat that with some more details.
Yeah, certainly. So when you look at the life cycle of gasoline or diesel fuel, you go back right to the beginning of the extraction and production of crude oil through the refining and then through the use. And so the use contributes about 75% of the total life cycle emissions, and the other 25% is, split between the crude oil and the refining, and it depends on what kind of crude oil, but 10 to 15% of the emissions are resulting from crude oil production. Again, 10 to 15% from refining, and then 75% from the use. So making net zero crude oil doesn't get you very far in terms of net zero gasoline or diesel fuel.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Kennings. Okay, on to round two for 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm going to start, Mr. Simard's line of questioning greatly interested me, Mr. Zacharias. I'm wondering, when we're talking about the production of green hydrogen, it's being sourced from primarily, I believe, hydroelectricity and renewable sources like solar and wind power. I'm just curious, if we don't bring on new sources of hydroelectricity, wind power, and solar power, as we see hydrogen begin to grow, what do you think the impact would be on electricity rates for Canadians?
No, that's a good question. So Canada's Healthy Economy, Healthy Environment Climate Plan, released on December 10th, talked about a 2 to 3 times increase in clean electricity requirements and generation for Canada. So speaking with NRCan officials, they tend to agree it's at least double the amount of power Canada's going to need by 2050 to power a net zero revolution. So as you scale up green hydrogen or clean hydrogen, yes, you are going to scale up. The amount of power is going to be increased across Canada. Now, having said that, though, is globally looking at renewable power costs, they are plummeting. So Alberta has 4 cents a kilowatt hour kind of bids for wind power. That, if you look at Saudi Arabia right now, they've just recently had a bid at 1.04 cents per kilowatt hour. That is unbelievably low. And those costs and those renewable power at scale prices will probably not be the same price for Canada, but we can scale up considerably at a very low cost. And again, it could be scaled up within the next 10 years if we need to.
What about, we've seen how difficult it is like to get like the Site C dam, we've seen the project in Newfoundland, Muskrat Falls. I mean, hydroelectricity is one of the backbones of Canada's electrical grid. Do you think that the growth in, wind power and solar power, given how much government subsidies are also going into it, do you think it will be able to replace our inability to build new hydroelectric capacity?
And I don't know the answer to that. I do know that there are a number of institutes working on that very question right now that are going to be reporting out over the next year or two. It's a good question.
Okay. My next line of question is, from your observations, where is most of the private sector investment going in the hydrogen space? Is it going to, blue hydrogen, or is it going to green hydrogen? Where are you seeing the private money going in this country?
Globally, I would look at green hydrogen is where the investment money is going for those countries that don't have natural gas assets. Right now in Canada, I think I see blue hydrogen as being kind of a source and attractive for capital right now, mainly because we have natural gas at very low cost. We've got a trained workforce. We've got companies that are set up and ready. And then we've got uses for natural gas right now as well. And blue hydrogen can be used in steel, cement, chemicals, fertilizers, and as well as the refining processes.
Something that Mr. Cannings was talking about, some people have been trying to push against this enhanced oil recovery. And, it's an issue that's quite close to my heart because the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line, which you referenced, it begins in my riding at the Sturgeon Redwater Refinery. And we know, we're sequestering over 1 million or over a megaton of carbon dioxide every year going into these somewhat nearly depleted oil wells, conventional oil wells near Red Deer. Would you agree that if we are going to be using oil as a resource for decades to come, that enhanced oil recovery is the most carbon efficient way to produce that oil?
Well, I would agree that if we are going to produce oil and if we are going to continue to produce oil in decades to come, EOR is one of the most efficient ways to do it. It's certainly much more efficient than oil sands mining and the refining that comes along with that. Again, we can get into a further conversation around kind of oil forecast futures, but right now EOR does seem to be a low cost and fairly sustainable way to produce oil.
Do you think it's also kind of like a good transition way? Because, it seems like it's very profitable for people that are investing in carbon capture to take that carbon. Quest, I believe, is injecting it into, some of these formations, but it's not being used for EOR. But, do you think it could be a good transition way for some of our, energy companies to invest more in carbon capture over the years to come, that EOR could help that transition?
Absolutely. We're at the beginning of a journey around hydrogen, and the infrastructure and the assets that you build today, whether it's road, rail, pipelines, processing, even though it may be specific to blue hydrogen now, it may transition to green hydrogen later, and it may provide us a competitive advantage to transition to green hydrogen at some later date. So I think those assets and that experience. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm short of time, so
you're actually out of town.
Oh, thanks.
You went over a bit.
Thanks, Mr. Zacharias.
We will get lots more opportunity though, so don't worry. Okay, Mr. Lefebvre, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and once again, we have a great panel of experts and witnesses here today. So thank you so much. Tout un commentaire avec mon collègue du bloc, Monsieur Simard.
When we talk about carbon capture and storage, witnesses say, I would encourage you to go see Mr. Lloyd's region. There's amazing technology there, and I think that we all should be made aware of this and really see with our own eyes what this potential is and the importance that this has.
A few things. Mr. Wolynitz, in your remarks, you shared that certainly your concerns with jobs as we transition, I guess, to a low carbon economy, and saying, well, a lot of the jobs there that we've, I guess, you're saying that will not be enough to offset the loss of jobs on the, I guess, in the fossil fuel industry. So I just want to know your sources of that, because it's a big statement to make. So what analysis, what studies are you basing that conclusion on? And yeah, maybe start with that.
Sure. So at Navius Research, most of our forward-looking analyses are produced with what's called a general equilibrium model. And this is a model that shows all of the interactions between the different sectors within the economy. So it tracks allocation of capital, commodities that are used and produced by different sectors, as well as employment. And so within this sort of model, we can simulate the impact of greenhouse gas policy, for example, that would lead us towards a net zero greenhouse gas emissions future. We can look at how that changes activity in different sectors, as well as emerging sectors. So these would be green energy sectors that may not exist yet. And from that, we can infer the quantity of jobs that may be lost in some sectors and that may be gained in other sectors. So the challenge with the transition we're facing is that we have a significant export industry in conventional energy sources that are emitting greenhouse gas emissions. In that transition, we may be able to supply ourselves with low carbon fuels. But if we don't seize opportunities to also continue to find ways of exporting energy as well, then there may be a contraction in the overall size of the energy sector. I would just want to put this in context, though. Nationally, the energy sector is an important sector, but Canada has a vast number of jobs in almost every other sector, and notably service-related sectors. Regionally, of course, though, it may be more important to support new energy, green energy growth and green energy jobs in some parts of Canada, notably Alberta and Saskatchewan, just to mitigate economic impacts in those regions.
So when you're having certainly that analysis, and as you're studying this, so we're talking about here about hydrogen and the future of that potential, certainly for Alberta, Saskatchewan, with respect to the CCUS. That's kind of what we talk about here, the blue hydrogen. We're also talking about biofuels a lot. I think when we talk about the clean fuel standards, so the potential that has certainly for the agricultural industry, are all of those jobs taken into context as well as the potential this has as we're going down that path?
We look across the full economy, and so the potential for new jobs from green energy sectors is very large. But to be honest, most of our analyses show that you're at high risk of net losses of jobs from Alberta, for example. Seizing an opportunity to export green energy in the form of hydrogen, I'm not as optimistic as Mr. Zacharias is, but that would certainly go a long way to mitigating that situation.
So we're still at a point of saying, well, say we know we need to decarbonize, and at the same time try to produce jobs or certainly keep jobs, right? Or transition these jobs, and that's kind of what the focus of certainly our government is. So thank you for that, because I think it's a concern that we all have at the same time, because we know we need to head in that direction. At the same time, how do we transition these workers to these to the same type of certainly of lifestyle that they have, because if we leave people behind, it's tough to get everybody on board. Just maybe I wanted to, Mr. Zacharias, on the hydrogen storage.
You've got about 10 seconds.
Okay, well, if you can just maybe expand on that, because I think it's, how much, what is the cost of that, and what is the potential of that?
Mr. Chair, do I have time to respond?
Very, very briefly.
Okay, I can follow up later after.
That's really brief, and that's perfect. Thank you. Okay, so next we have Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Merci. Monsieur.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, you seem perplexed on this issue of hydrogen. I believe that you ended your presentation by saying that you were skeptical with regards to hydrogen. So I'm not sure if you can extrapolate on this. What elements explain the reserve that you might have with regards to hydrogen?
Of excitement and news about green hydrogen becoming cost competitive with blue hydrogen in the near term. And I think there's some nuance and some context there that causes me to be somewhat more reserved in my excitement. The first one is we have to think about the context. So if we're making green hydrogen from solar power, the costs are truly plummeting for solar power. Canada has a good solar resource, but not nearly as good as, for example, the US Southwest. So the cost of solar power here will never be as cheap as it is in the US Southwest. The other cause for excitement, I believe, is the fact that you can make green hydrogen from electricity at hours of the day or times of the year when that electricity has a relatively low value. The problem is, as soon as you enter into that market, you suddenly have a use for that electricity. And people will enter into that market until that electricity becomes expensive again. What's more is hydrogen is not the only use for that electricity. We're also seeing costs of battery energy storage plummeting so that energy utilities or other players in the energy market could use that electricity, store it, and deliver it at a time when it's much more valuable. So this idea of an off-peak resource for hydrogen, it's real, but it's by no means unlimited. It's always going to exist at the margin.
Vous veniez de parler du coût.
You just spoke of the cost for cells and the cost that's improving. So what about the cost linked to this carbon sequestering to produce hydrogen, blue hydrogen? Are those costs high? And are they dissuasive to the point where people who would want to create blue hydrogen will be tempted to ask for federal support? And I'm asking this question because I'm wondering what would be the advantage between hydrogen with carbon capture or hydrogen created through stocking in energy cells?
Good time for a very quick answer.
From the perspective of greenhouse gas emissions, no particular advantage. From the perspective of helping manage the electricity system, hydrogen may be useful there. From the perspective of someone in a natural gas producing region that wants to keep their job, blue hydrogen could be useful there.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Cannings, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I'll go to Mr. Wolynitz again. And at the end of your presentation, I think you were talking about low carbon renewable fuels and some of the advantages and pitfalls. And one that you quickly ran through at the end was concern around disturbance of soils and deforestation that must be avoided. I just wondered if you could expand on that, what you meant there.
Sure. There is a vast amount of carbon that is locked up in the biomass, so the forests, as well as the soils of Canada. If you do something to produce fuels that disturbs that carbon, you can very easily end up in a situation where you're releasing more greenhouse gas emissions than you would by using fossil fuel emissions. And Don O'Connor is certainly more of an expert on this than me. The concern I have is in our modeling analyses, we show a market and a need for low carbon biofuels such that it is driving up the price of feedstock to the point where you could conceivably be logging forests to produce that feedstock. So if this kind of fuel production is existing outside of good greenhouse gas accounting and life cycle greenhouse gas accounting, you'd be missing a really big part of the picture. There are challenges there. I mean, I'll give you an example. BC has a fairly healthy export industry of wood pellets, which are used for energy in other parts of the world. Previously, most of those wood pellets were coming from mill waste, so less leftovers after you use the wood at a lumber mill or paper mill. However, those pellet companies have long-term contracts to deliver pellets, and if there's a downturn in the forestry industry, there's suddenly less waste. And there have been incidences and reports of them bringing in whole logs. They may have been dead logs or downed logs, but whole logs to turn into pellets. Now, the problem is those logs would have sat as logs for a century or more and would have then delivered some of their carbon both to the soil and atmosphere. And if we bring them in and turn them into pellets, we're releasing those carbon emissions right away. So there are challenges with bioenergy, certainly bioenergy from forestry or agricultural residue, where you can disturb the carbon balances within nature.
Okay, okay. I was going to ask Mr. O'Connor to elaborate, but if there's...
Yeah, go ahead quickly. You've got about 15 seconds.
Thank you.
So it's all true what's being said, but it's also true that we can build soil carbon, particularly in agriculture. And Canada has an excellent track record of this, where we have more than 10 million tons a year of CO2 being added to the soils across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba every year, because we've adopted more sustainable agricultural practices in the last 10 or 20 years. And it's forecast that that increase in soil carbon, while it declines a little bit every year, it's going to continue for quite a number of years going forward.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Cannings. Okay, Mr. McLean, over to you for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses today. It's fascinating, and there's a whole bunch of questions I have here for elaboration. First of all, Mr. O'Connor, thank you very much for your presentation. The one thing that struck me very clearly was you talked about the importance of reducing CO2 emissions sooner rather than waiting to reduce them up to 2030. When you consider life cycle analysis of these transitions and the upfront CO2 emissions involved in the transition, how does that square with reducing emissions now versus 2030?
So generally speaking, the emissions that are associated with building plants tend to be a very small portion of what ends up being the total life cycle. It's not usually included in most life cycle analysis, because you run into questions like, over what period of time should we amortize these construction emissions? Should we do 20 years, which is what we do for tax purposes, knowing that the plants last a lot longer? So the fact that they're small, we have this issue of no one can agree on the amortization period. They're generally not included, and they don't impact the conclusion that we should be doing as much today as we possibly can.
Okay, well, thank you. We looked at this years ago when I was in venture capital. We looked at biofuels costing 1.6 units of energy to produce 1 unit of energy, life cycle analysis. We've asked for some updates on those numbers and haven't received them. That's like paying $1.60 to earn $1. Can you square that for me as far as how that makes sense in the biofuels inclusion in an efficient energy horizon going forward?
So if you go back 30 or 40 years ago, that might be true, but there's been tremendous improvements in the efficiency of really all aspects of the biofuel production process. So
yeah, this was just over a decade ago, so we're not 30 or 40 years in.
Yeah, but this could still have been some pretty old data.
Well, actually, they've confirmed that data for us. They won't, and we haven't seen the updates in the last decade, so we're looking for that.
Well, I have data from existing operating plants operating today that use about 25% of the energy that they did 20 years ago.
Okay, well, thank you. Over to Mr. Wolynitz now. Mr. Wolynitz, thank you for your last response to my colleague's question, because we have heard from the forestry study here, this whole nature of the mosaic of the forest and how some of the forest naturally will burn. Some of the forest will actually have to decay and, take 100 years to release the carbon as opposed to turning it into it. And so you think that there's still some residues left that we can turn into biofuels, given what the forest industry needs as far as that mosaic they talk about to fuel their industry and to maintain their carbon footprint?
Yeah, absolutely. So from the forestry industry, I think the big untapped opportunity is what's called harvest residues. So when logging happens, there are a lot of smaller pieces of biomass. So these would be tree branches and tree tops. They decay relatively quickly. And in some cases, they're actually piled and burned on site in order to mitigate fire risk.
Slag. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, slash piles. So that's the opportunity there. We're not talking about whole tree harvesting or pulling up stumps or anything like that. We're talking about this relatively short-lived biomass that in some cases is already being released to the atmosphere.
Yeah, but at the same time, the Forest Industry says that's what they want to use as well. So I'm just worried about duplicating what our environmental inputs are here as far as who's going to use that excess biomass for something different in the process here.
Yeah, so that's a real concern. Like to put it simply, everyone's counting on the same truck of wood chips. I have talked to some experts who believe in the future every molecule of usable wood will be used for something. We shouldn't necessarily count on that wood going into fuels. It could also be used for a number of different products, so bioproducts. That being said, energy is a large bulk commodity market, whereas a lot of other things are specialty items. So it provides a significant opportunity.
Great, thank you. Let me ask another question here. There's a report came out from a group called Thunder Said Energy out of the UK that is confirmed something a whole bunch of studies said, and that's that the building on what Mr. Patzer said earlier in this testimony, that the CO2 produced from biofuels when you break new land is effectively double what you're replacing that fuel with. And Mr. Jacquard was one of our witnesses here a week ago. He's from the University of Victoria. He said he's seen 30 studies like that. He disagrees with those 30 plus studies, but can you comment on that? Because it seems like this is recurrent, that we're actually producing more CO2 from biofuels production with new land being broken, as opposed to, the already existing stock of biofuels material.
So I agree with the statement that if you break new land, you could emit a significant quantity of greenhouse gas emissions. What I don't agree with is that our current bioenergy system depends on breaking new land. Based on what I've seen, cropland in Canada in general has been declining slightly. And nor do I agree with the statement that you would have to break new land in order to expand the bioenergy system.
Thank you. Oh, thanks, Mr. McLean. Mr. May, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get into the questions that I had, I wanted to just through you, Mr. Chair, acknowledge that Mr. McLean actually had a very good point that we might be working with data that's not nearly current enough, and I'm wondering if Mr. O'Connor would be willing to share that data that he referred to us. Obviously not right at the moment. I'm sure there's a lot to it, but if Mr. O'Connor, if that's something you could provide us, I know that we would greatly appreciate that.
There is some information in the public domain that I could share. Of course, a lot of the information that I have from companies is confidential, and I can't share individual company information, but I do know that there is some information in the public domain.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Plumtree. I'm wondering if you can maybe comment on, how can we leverage the opportunity that renewable fuels, low carbon fuels, and carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration present us, and their associated decarbonization to create the just transition for those working in the fossil fuel industry today.
Thank you, Mr. May. Well, that's a very big question. I think, to pick up on something that Mr. O'Connor was emphasizing in his remarks, I think that one of the things that this committee could potentially have an influence on, given the fact that the clean fuel regulations have yet to actually be promulgated in Canada Gazette Part 2, they're still under development, is to push for a potential, reorientation in the design of these regulations to focus on the development of renewable fuel pathways and energy pathways that are consistent with reductions in that 75% of emissions in the life cycle that Mr. O'Connor was referring to in terms of end use combustion. That those scope 3 emissions are really what we need to reduce in order to make progress on these longer term aspirations that we have for net zero by 2050. And I think that right now, the regulation is trying to do a lot of things in terms of supporting pathways like carbon capture and enhanced oil recovery, which may be legitimate things to support when we bring in other criteria like just transition. But in terms of the math of reducing carbon emissions, that focus on scope 3 is something that that could be enhanced through the regulation that's under development right now.
Do you have, and again, my focus is more on the just transition piece, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or suggestions on how we can use the incredible skills of the workforce that we have. What type of training, if any, would be necessary to hire, to move today's fossil fuel workers into tomorrow's low carbon future workers?
Well, I think we have a bit of a model that the federal government has already started to develop in its Just Transition Task Force for powering past coal. We, have made federal investments into, some centers to, develop new training opportunities for oil and gas workers. Clearly there's not going to be a one-to-one transfer of every type of skill, and the labor market is something that will evolve over time. But this is a tough nut to crack, and
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Quickly to Mr. Zacharias, my question for you, sir, is about transportation of hydrogen, to its final destination from production site. How do we store large quantities of hydrogen, and is this method commercially viable if we were to increase nationwide hydrogen production, whether it be 10-fold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold, for that export use? Do you have any thoughts on the transportation side of this?
It's a good question. We would need to build out a new hydrogen transportation infrastructure if we were to scale up, 2 or 3-fold at least. Right now, you can transport hydrogen in trucks at 250 to 500 bar, up to 10,000 psi, but it's not all that cost effective. I think in the near term, blending hydrogen with the existing natural gas stream up to kind of ratios of 20+% may be possible. At some point, many jurisdictions are looking at dedicated hydrogen pipelines. Fortis in BC is looking at the potential to use a disused natural gas pipeline, re-sleeve it, and then it could accommodate up to 100% hydrogen. So there are a number of kind of storage and transportation options out there, but I think it's early days for Canada.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. May. Okay, we're moving into a third round, 5 minutes each, starting with Mr. Zimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first question goes to Mr. Wollenitz. I guess I'll start off. I've asked different groups before about the affordability of renewables. I think it ultimately comes down to the person using them. We need to make them affordable. Certainly our fuel prices have gone up, and we need to make it so it's sustainable too for Canadians. They're the ultimate payers of the bill, so to speak. So again, we need to make it affordable. Mr. Wollenitz, just a question. You talked about the contraction in the energy sector, that possible that this would occur. I see, though, I'm in northern BC, and we have a huge plays of natural gas, and as many know in Canada, one of the largest project ever taken on privately is our LNG Canada project out on the west coast. All to get that clean natural gas to the world, and we all know that that's going to reduce emissions. It has the potential impact of halving emissions where they're using higher emitting forms of energy. What can we do more to promote that clean energy? This is something that's available right now that we can get out to the world. And, even in the next 10 to 20 years, if there's new forms of renewables that come out that might be better, if we can go to electrification, et cetera. This is certainly a good idea in the midterm. What are some opinions around that, Mr. Willens?
My opinion is the greenhouse gas benefit of exporting LNG is transitory. You're absolutely right. Burning gas is less emissions intensive than coal. But I have not seen a very long-term study, sort of mid-century, where the world is trending towards very deep greenhouse gas reductions that shows a large or growing role for natural gas in any energy system. It's going to be a supporting role that's probably going to be dwindling over the years. So I think from the perspective of trying to support a clean energy transition, I don't think LNG has a very strong role there.
But I guess I'm a little bit puzzled by your answer, because I mean, we know, even if we look in the United States, a lot of the ways that electricity is produced is with coal, it's with other hydrocarbons. So to me, to use one that's of the fossil fuels that's going to emit the least, that would seem an obvious answer. But nevertheless, I wanted to ask you about the forest sector, because it was referred to about renewables and using some of those, the waste products from the process of making lumber, bark, tree stems, stumps, that kind of stuff. I live in a very remote part of the province. We're 15 hours away from Vancouver, and even more remote are these logging places that are up the highway. The biggest challenge is the remoteness. It's to get these products that are often put into burn piles, and we all would like to use them in a better way to make pellets and things like that, to be used efficiently. How do you overcome the life cycle, the reality of most of this waste to be used for renewable energy is so remote?
So transportation cost is a big element of any bioenergy system. The estimate I gave, where I'm talking about maybe 15 to 20% of our current fossil fuel liquid energy consumption could be substituted with bioenergy produced from residues from forestry and farming. That is taking into account both sustainability criteria as well as technical criteria and to some extent production cost. So the estimates of how much residue is available, they are generally produced within a spatial analysis where they're considering where is this stuff relative to our transportation networks or our major processing hubs. The higher a value you have for that fuel, the further afield you might go to get it. But without a doubt, there are certainly some remote logging operations where it won't make sense to bring in that residue, and there are others where it will make sense.
Well, I guess it brings me back to what a colleague, Greg McLean, was talking about, the life cycle. And do we end up by the end of the day, by the time we've gotten and collected some of the wood waste, bring them back, processed, all the process that's involved in that, do we come out ahead at the end of it all? It doesn't seem
in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, absolutely. And the analysis tools that we use cover the full economy and all energy use within the economy. And so it doesn't show that we somehow run out of energy. The question is not how much energy we have, is can we use energy without causing environmental damage? There's vast quantities of energy available. So it's the environmental damage we need to concern ourselves with.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Zorn.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, back to Mr. Weiler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to pick up on a point that that my colleague was just mentioning on the potential. You mentioned earlier in your opening, Mr. Wollenitz, the potential for substantial abatement if we're using more grassy or woody products. And I think the previous member really mentioned a key point in terms of what is it going to take? I mean, what type of support or what type of regulation is it going to take to kind of incentivize or kind of move us more in the direction of use of those products that are now just that are going to waste or otherwise?
So I think policies like the clean fuel regulation are very helpful. That being said, the clean fuel regulation, to get to a point where you're using those wastes, would need to be stronger. So we need to be thinking about where it's going after 2030. something more in line with where California and BC expect to be with their similar policies by 2030. That should do it. In BC, for example, it's already provided enough of a transitional signal for the refinery in the Greater Vancouver area to start doing co-processing, where they're looking at how do we actually use these materials and process them at the same time with our fossil crude in order to make a sort of blended renewable fossil product in such a way where you could eventually transition over to a fully renewable product. So I think we're on the right track with the clean fuel regulation, but we need to expect that it would need to get stronger.
Thanks for that. My next question is for Mr. Plumtree. You mentioned in your opening the importance of things like the clean fuel standard and other policies to ensure that we have we're not picking winners. We're going to have kind of a portfolio-based approach and have the certainty for investment going forward in some of these lower carbon products in the future. So my question to you is what risk do you see to investment today in the technologies that we're going to need for this type of a low carbon future? When you see other parties perhaps putting out policies or suggesting policies that would be less ambitious or would eliminate some of these different mechanisms that are proposed?
It's a great question. Thank you. I think, to take the example of the federal low carbon fuel standard or the clean fuel regulation, we have a a proposal from the leader of the opposition that would see the stringency of the signal of that policy actually go beyond what is currently proposed in terms of the average life cycle carbon intensity of fuels by 2030. So the CFR right now, as proposed, is aiming for about 13% by 2030. There's in BC, provincially, it's already at 20%. Similarly with California, they're already into the sort of phase 2 of their programs. And so I would say that it's understandable that Canada is just starting to get going, but other jurisdictions are already moving ahead, and where the risk potentially lies is in some of these fuels that do present an opportunity to make a near-term contribution to our emissions reductions, as Mr. O'Connor was again emphasizing in his remarks. There are some of these fuels that are promising, like renewable diesel, that could play a large role in mitigating those residual emissions that still occur in the transportation sector as it's increasingly electrified in passenger transport. But we're still going to be dependent on liquid hydrocarbon fuels in both the light and heavy duty sectors for a long time to come. And so those residual emissions could be substantially reduced if we were to increase our shares of things like biodiesel and renewable diesel. And the risk right now is that other jurisdictions are moving ahead. And, so in just the past year, I think, U.S. petroleum refiners, like, there have been several, Marathon, Phillips 66, Chevron, Renewable Energy Group, HollyFrontier Corporation. These are all companies that have been making multi-billion-dollar investments in upgrading their refining operations. And we're so far not seeing too much of that type of activity here in Canada, although it does seem to be the case that some investments are starting to be announced now that we're getting to the point of actually implementing the regulation. And so I'm encouraged by that.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Weiler. I'll have to stop you there. Okay, back to Mr. Simard for 2.5 minutes.
Oui, c'est mon tour. Oui, merci.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Walnitz, I heard you speak earlier on biofuels, and you spoke about jobs, and we did a study on the potential of the Quebec forest over a horizon of 10 years. 16,000 jobs could be created in this process if we maximize the forestry sector. Unfortunately, government support is absent. I can give you an example of Elkem Metal. They're going to create a biofuel in a metallurgical process. This reduces the carbon footprint, and they've received no federal funding. So if we want to develop a strategy to maximize forestry residue in the biomass, don't you think that we should have a federal strategy
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I think there is a significant opportunity for clean energy production and for economic development in the forestry sector. I personally feel that it would be of equal importance to hydrogen. So in that sense, a federal strategy could be a helpful thing. That being said, in terms of driving the growth of that overall sector, I still believe it's better to set the policy that would create the market conditions to make it happen in the long run, in the big picture.
Merci, je trouve ça intéressant.
Thank you. So a supply policy for or a procurement policy from the federal government that would put the carbon footprint as a criteria, could this be something that would be useful for you to develop this market?
Government procurement could be a very useful tool to create the early market conditions that help this industry or sector get going. But to fully scale it up, I don't think government procurement would be necessarily the correct tool. You'd want to be addressing the carbon intensity of the wider pool of fuels the way the clean fuel regulation does.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Thanks, Mr. Simard. Got out of time, unfortunately. Mr. Canning's over to you.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to pick up on something that Mr. Zimmer was asking about and maybe turn it over to Mr. O'Connor in terms of the narrative that, of course, we want to use our natural gas reserves and resources in British Columbia to export those, and the climate argument there is that this would replace coal and be a good thing for the world. I'm just wondering if there's been any life cycle analyses of that whole process and how natural gas does compare to coal, and really if there's anyone on the panel today who could talk about the future of Canada's natural gas exports in this changing world of different fuels.
So there have been a number of studies done in various locations looking at natural gas versus coal, and there have been a few done looking at exported LNG displacing coal. So that information is available. I think the pushback that you get from people is, well, how can we be 100% sure that it's displacing coal and not adding to additional energy demand?
Okay, well, thank you very much for that. Turning to Mr. Plumtree, you mentioned that these clean fuel standards were more stringent in some places, that we needed regulations that were increasingly stringent. I'm just wondering whether you could elaborate on that, where Canada needs to go with our clean fuel standards to achieve the best results.
Thank you, Mr. Canning. So I believe that the clean fuel regulation is fundamentally on the right track, but I do think that we've ended up in a situation, just given the length of time it's taken to develop this admittedly fairly complex policy, in a place where the regulation is perhaps a bit unbalanced relative to what was originally envisioned. So, when the government announced the Clean Fuel Standard, as it was then called, back in 2016, they were targeting 30 megatons of emissions reductions by 2030. That scope of ambition and the scope of the coverage of the policy was reduced by about a third. In favor of carbon pricing last fall or last winter under the Healthy Economy, Healthy Environment Plan, along with the commitment to quite drastically increase the rate of growth in the carbon price. And so that was a reasonable policy decision to make. But I think that as a result, the design of the clean fuel regulation has ended up in a place where There were all kinds of flexibilities introduced into the regulation to account for the fact that it was originally intended to cover both liquid, gaseous, and solid fuels, and now it's only focused on liquids.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Kennings. Okay, back to Mr. Patzer for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wolynitz, in your opening remarks, you touched on something that's extremely important in my riding and in lots of areas across the country, and that's the impact of rural Canadians. I'm concerned about the viability for rural Canada going forward, especially as the cost of living and the cost of energy goes up with these, whether it be policies like the carbon tax, like clean fuel standards and regulations, and just the transportation cost it's going to take for all this change in energy. We also know it's going to disproportionately impact seniors on fixed incomes. It's also going to have a massive impact for people who are already living in energy poverty in our urban communities. And when we're looking for jobs for people in rural Canada, one of the strengths of rural Canada is that you can live for a lower wage. You can, at least it used to be that you can make minimum wage or a little bit higher than minimum wage, but still be able to afford to live in rural Canada. These days, that's not so much the case because the cost of everything is going up, and this energy transition continues to drive the cost higher for these people, but the wages don't increase with them. So how can we justify for the people in rural Canada, but also for seniors on fixed incomes and people on energy poverty to continue down this path that we're headed on?
Certainly. I don't think greenhouse gas reduction and poverty reduction are mutually exclusive, and you may need to implement separate and unrelated policies to ensure that you're not unduly affecting people on low incomes or seniors on fixed incomes. In terms of rural living, there are some real opportunities within a bioenergy system to increase employment in those areas. So you would be increasing wage rates, increasing well-being. Certainly it's not necessarily the case for all people who live in rural areas, but none of this is going to affect their collection and use of heating wood. So that's on one hand. The other hand is just the natural turnover of our stock of vehicles, our furnaces, our water heaters, and the impact of minimum energy efficiency regulations means that people's energy costs also have a downward force acting on them. So it's not just that fuels will get more expensive, but generally speaking, over the years and decades, the efficiency of everybody's equipment is going up. So that can mitigate a lot of this.
Yeah, I mean, the efficiency side of things is definitely good, and that benefits everybody. But government regulations, it states right in them that the avenues that they are pursuing are going to disproportionately impact these people. So to say that they're mutually exclusive is not necessarily the case, because we know that GHG reduction is the point of a clean fuel standard. It is the point of the carbon tax. And it states clearly right in it that those people are going to be disproportionately impacted. So
sure. What I mean is that the goals of those policies are not mutually exclusive. You can use revenue recycling in any number of ways to try and mitigate the economic impact on certain segments of the population. You can use changes to your tax policy to do the same. You can use other sorts of policies to mitigate that. I think yourself and everyone is always concerned for the lower income segments of our society. And implementing greenhouse gas policy, we should always be mindful of how it impacts them and consider adjustments to the policy or, in fact, other policies outright in order to make sure they're not unduly affected.
Okay, and this question will be for you, and it could be for if any of the others want to answer it as well, too. Like right now we're seeing a shift to combined cycle natural gas power plants in Saskatchewan. There's one just built just northwest of Swift Current. It provides, I think, around 353 megawatts of power, which basically it can do 350,000 homes or more. So it's tremendous baseload power. It's natural gas, so it's cheap energy. Are these units going to continue to be viable going forward? And will biofuels, biofuel is going to be an option for utilizing, or for being used in these power plants as well too going forward?
In the work we've done, we see by 2050, you need something pretty close to a zero emissions electricity sector, which means using natural gas, even efficiently in a combined cycle power plant, is not compatible with that. You can decarbonize the gas stream. You could inject renewable natural gas or even hydrogen. And then there are modifications that would be required to make that turbine still operate with a high amount of hydrogen in it. That being said, these units, 30 years out may still be viable in terms of adding support to the system. So they're there, they're standing by. You use them very rarely, but they're still part of that system in terms of offering a diversified and reliable source of power should it be needed.
Thank you. All right, thanks, Mr. Patzer. And over to Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. A terrific discussion today. I'm subbing on the committee today I normally sit on the Environment Committee, but I also see we have a University of Guelph alumnus with us today. So Dr. Zacharias, welcome. It's always good to have Guelph in the house. I saw that you had your PhD in zoology from the U of G. I wanted to start my questioning with you, Dr. Zacharias, in terms of the infrastructure needed for the transition to the hydrogen as a fuel source in transportation. I also co-chair the Automotive Caucus with Mr. May, who's also in this discussion. And we have looked at the larger vehicles being powered by hydrogen versus electric vehicles. And Linamar in Guelph is working on that transition, but we'll need a network of hydrogen supply for vehicles. You mentioned a little bit about infrastructure in your comments. Could you expand on that a little bit and what we would need to do through the work of NRCan?
No, thanks for the question. If hydrogen becomes more favorable as a technology for medium and heavy duty vehicles than batteries, then a huge scale up is going to be required nationwide. Right now, batteries are winning the battle on light duty vehicles. Batteries are winning the battle on last mile delivery vans. They're winning the battle on basically urban transit buses, as you can see with Ottawa's announcement yesterday and the TTC. So hydrogen is a kind of long-term transport fuel. It's really probably semi-class 8 type trucks, and that's probably it right now. Looking at the U.S. and what the Biden administration is looking at for scaling up, they're charging electric charging networks. Canada to do the same in hydrogen, I just don't know it's possible other than the major, trans-Canada highways at this point. So right. A lot of work needs to be done.
And out your way, the company Ballard has been involved for many, many years. I know I worked with Ballard on some of their systems in the mid-90s. And they were looking at trains and they were looking at larger vehicles, as you said, class 8s. Class 5s would be EVs, but actually getting large shipments across the Trans-Canada. NRCan is funding the Ivy network in Ontario for electric vehicles. As you said, there's a challenge there.
Absolutely. And the additional challenge is that Canada has, globally, we have the cheapest electricity rates in the G7. So again, that's another sort of tick against hydrogen as a transportation fuel for Canada. And it may make sense for hydrogen buses in China and other companies, but it'll be more difficult in Canada to scale up the hydrogen infrastructure and compete against battery electric vehicles.
But to continue that argument, if we look at Japan going to zero emission vehicles, a study that we looked at in the Environment Committee as well, Europe going to zero emission vehicles, we may be buying vehicles that are zero emission. The market might be ahead of us in terms of us delivering policy and programs.
Yes, maybe. I would look at Canada, particularly in the battery, medium, heavy-duty vehicle space. We're doing quite well. I mean, Lion Electric has an order for 2,400 trucks from Amazon. GM's going to be building vans at their plant in Ontario. We have the metals and minerals to supply a battery manufacturing, and a lot of work going on in that space that's happening through government right now. So again, it's not hydrogen related, and it's not low carbon fuels related, but it generally has the same objective at the end of the day, which is decarbonization of transportation.
Terrific. Thank you. And I'm going to switch over to the Pembina Institute on my last 50 seconds. Looking at carbon capture and storage, the Pembina Institute actually gave me some very good information on that last summer when I was doing some research around that, where the 45Q program in the States had some tax incentives. I understand Finance Canada has an open call for people wanting to contribute to tax policy around encouraging carbon capture and storage. Are you involved with that, with the Pembina Institute?
Certainly, I'd be happy to connect you with my colleagues who are leading our participation in that consultation process, which I believe is ongoing. And I think that the government is looking to have that concluded by the fall so that investments can actually start getting underway.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Longfield.
Thank you, Chair.
Appreciate that. Okay. We've got about 16 minutes left. We're going into another round of 6-minute questions, which would mean only 2 people would get to ask, unless everybody agrees to reduce it to 4 minutes per person, we can get everybody in for one round. Does anybody disagree with that? No? Okay, great. So continuing with the Lloyd theme, Mr. Lloyd, you are next.
I'm passing my time on to Mr. McLean.
Okay, Mr. McLean, you've got 4 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Dean Lloyd. Moving, and I'll remind Mr. Longfield, the last speaker, that shortly last week in the House, he voted against carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So thank you, Mr. Longfield, for getting in a new wrapper that might look a little better from your perspective. Much appreciated. But I'll go to Mr. O'Connor here. Mr. O'Connor, you were talking in your testimony about increasing yields from crops. Now, Mr. O'Connor, increasing yields is probably built on things like fertilizers and technologies, all of which, of course, are carbon intensive, energy intensive. So give the circular rationale for me about how we actually get more energy efficiency by actually producing more, if you will, carbon in order to kind of get to the biofuels at the end of the day.
So it's not really true that we're using more fertilizer per ton of product. We actually see increases in nitrogen use efficiency in most crops across Canada. But we also have things like new varieties that are being developed. Tractors are getting more efficient. In implementation of innovation practices in agriculture is actually a very social kind of exercise. And all of the ag groups look at how they can help their, even their average producer become as effective as their most efficient producers.
Sorry, partly got a little bit of time here. Yeah. I'll move to Mr. Zachariah here. Mr. Zachariah, you talked about, in the same vein, trying to circle some of the facts here, 100 gigawatts of hydrogen power coming in the near term here, 100 times Site C. Site C anticipated to cost $16 billion, is way beyond delivery. Like, we're going to actually get power out of Site C at best at 2025. So way more cost, way more time. Tell us how far away these hydrogen solutions are that are 100 times the Site C that we're talking about.
So the example I gave of Western Australia looking to scale up over the next decade, which has, much like the Southwest US, has tremendous solar opportunities and wind opportunities. We may not have that in Canada. Canada's basically scale up on hydrogen is likely going to be stepped, and it'll be blue hydrogen, which is happening now, in very modest increases for specific applications, followed by probably green hydrogen, which is happening already in Quebec. There's an 88 megawatt electrolyzer being built there. And basically in those provinces that actually have energy surpluses at certain times of the year, where they could take there's existing load available to produce green hydrogen.
Let's stop, because we do have to talk about capacity, not just about excesses at certain points in time of the year. So I think we both agree there. But I'll ask one final question, Mr. Zachariah, which was, we're going to need 2 to 3 times much in energy. We've talked about this. And yet, in order to replace the natural gas delivery network as far as power goes in Ontario and Quebec alone, is going to require 7 times Grand Blanc. Enbridge came here and provided us 7 times the 15,000 megawatt facilities that are a Grand style project. That's not going to happen short term, is it?
Nope. Takes many years to scale up.
Yeah, thank you very much. And one final question here for Mr. Plumtree. A lot of things you said in your presentation, you talked about things like de-risking. Now, I spent 20 years in the financial industry, Mr. Plumtree, and when I hear somebody saying things like de-risking, it means transferring risk from the actual project proponents to the taxpayer. And we call that rent seeking. We say, who's going to benefit from this at the end of the day? And it better be actually the taxpayers of Canada, if the taxpayers of Canada are actually the ones that are paying for it. Can you comment on that, please?
Oh, I would absolutely agree that these policies are implemented with the taxpayer or more properly citizens in mind. I think that when I was discussing the idea of risk, what I was trying to get at is that from an investor's perspective, from my experience interacting, and I should be clear, of course, I don't represent the clean fuel industries in participating here in the panel, but from my interactions with investors in these spaces, what I've consistently heard is that a reliance on some form, some expression of the public purse, whether through tax expenditures or through direct subsidies in one form or another, is much less preferable to getting projects underway than to have a secure, dependable regulatory program in place that they know is going to be there in 5, 10, 15 years.
You're talking about all of these.
Thank you, Mr. McLean.
When you talk about de-risking. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lefebvre, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll continue talking to Mr. Plumtree. I'm just wondering, certainly in the study, as we're looking at certainly clean fuels, and certainly I just want to maybe we get your feedback to this committee on the importance of having a price on carbon or carbon tax, and whether we can reach our targets without one, our climate targets without a price on pollution or a carbon tax.
Well, I mean, I know that the committee has heard from Professor Jacquard on this matter, and that strictly speaking, from an economics perspective, these targets could be reached without a carbon tax. I think that from a practical perspective, when I look at where Canada is today, my answer is no. We can't do it without a carbon price, but that doesn't obviate the need for complementary regulations in order to get to where we need to go.
Yeah, and just like the clean fuel standards is very important as well, certainly. And that, but what's actually what's optimistic, I guess, as on a go-forward basis. Now we have all political parties that agree on a carbon tax. For a while, the Conservatives were obviously fighting against it, and now they're on board. So I find that at least we're all on the same page, moving these things forward. Mr. Zacharias, you mentioned, I had asked you a question, I know it was a long time ago now, about an hour and a half ago, but certainly on the hydrogen storage that you talked about, because I think it's very important that we understand this, because I want to know a bit very quickly, how do we store large quantities of hydrogen, and is this commercially viable? And because if we're going to see an increase in nationwide hydrogen production, 10-fold, 100-fold, like what are the challenges and what are the opportunities? Go ahead.
Well, there's many different ways to store hydrogen. You can store it in tanks under pressure. You can store it underground in salt caverns, which is happening in the US. You can convert it into another product, such as ammonia, and you can transport it long distances. You lose about 30% of the efficiency on hydrogen by doing that. And like natural gas, you can store it in pipelines if you have a dedicated pipeline network, and it can provide quite suitable and long-term storage. So those questions haven't yet been sorted out. And again, I think we're a ways away before being able to answer those.
Yeah, because we had a witness last week or on Monday, I forget, and he talked about certainly in the U.S. that there was a hydrogen pipeline. It was very interesting for us to know, obviously looking at what kind of infrastructure do you need for that, right? And can we convert an existing pipeline to a hydrogen pipeline or not? So those are certainly, I'm sure those are questions that are being top of mind for a lot of, certainly as we look down a path. What are your thoughts on that?
You simply can't repurpose a natural gas or oil pipeline into hydrogen without re-sleeving it and doing a number of other retrofits. So it's not easy, and it'll be a while before that technology scales up to a point where it's cost effective. Now, having said that, if hydrogen is used adjacent to where it's produced, then the cost of storage and transportation can be quite low. And so, for example, hydrogen, that would be generated near a city like Vancouver and then input into the natural gas grid, either at 20% through an existing pipeline or 100% through a dedicated hydrogen pipeline. Those economics could work at some point in the future.
And how much actually can you input? You talked about, I forget, I think you mentioned this in your opening remarks, around 15%. Like how much can we input hydrogen in a natural gas pipeline?
Right now, it's 20%.
20%.
Maximum.
So the maximum right now, and you say right now, can you explain?
Well, depending on the age of the pipeline and depending on the equipment at the end that's going to be burning the fuel, you could have domestic or commercial equipment that could use greater than 20% hydrogen in the gas supply. So,
thank you. Very interesting.
Thanks, Mr. Lefebvre. And Mr. Simard, over to you. Mario.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you. I would have another question for Mr. Wolynets. A quick question. You spoke about the potential of job creation in low carbon footprint sectors. Do you have any figures on what the development of the biomass industry could represent, jobs-wise?
Nationally, if we're just talking about the collection and delivery of feedstock to production facilities, it could be on the order of 20 to 30,000 jobs nationally, roughly speaking. But yeah, I can look for some numbers and perhaps send you something offline if you'd like.
Vous dites 20 à 30 000 emplois, Mr.
20 to 30,000 on a horizon of how many years?
OK. Donc, le développement, tout à l'heure, il y a quelque chose.
So you said something earlier, and I'm not sure if I understood this correctly, the development of biofuels. According to what I understand, there are no projects that's supposed to take anything other than forest residue. So in Canada, I've looked at this. In Canada, there's no project that seeks to take trees to create biofuel. Where it becomes advantageous is if you use forest residue to do this. Is this your thinking as well?
It is from a greenhouse gas reduction perspective and a cost perspective, preferable to be using forest residues. That being said, the value of biofuels could rise such that you might be looking at other feedstocks that have less of a positive greenhouse gas impact.
Comme les résidus agricoles.
Same thing with agricultural residue, for example. So do you find that the targets that have been set out in the policy on clean fuel are sufficiently strict in order to develop this market of biofuels?
The federal clean fuel regulation, in my opinion, is unlikely to be sufficiently strict between now and 2030 to require agricultural or forestry residues to be part of our bioenergy system. There's enough abatement from first generation biofuels, from electrification, from carbon capture and storage to comply with that policy over the next 9 years.
Une cible qui vous apparaîtrait
So a target that would be appropriate to develop this industry. What would it look like in your opinion?
I think it would be something that is trending towards the requirement in British Columbia or, for example, California. So instead of about a 13% reduction in life cycle carbon intensity of fuels, moving towards a 20% reduction.
Thank you. Mr. Simard, I'm probably going to have to stop you there and move on to Mr. Cannings. You've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to turn to Mr. O'Connor, talk about and pick up on this forest fuel, forest waste fuel used to create renewable natural gas and what the life cycle analysis on that looks like, and how much of a future you see for that aspect within Canada. I know Fortis, for instance, in British Columbia, is trying to get more renewable natural gas. I have a company in my riding that wants to build 2 or 3 of these plants in my riding. They feel they have enough feedstock, to more than enough feedstock. I'm just wondering if you could talk at least first about the life cycle analysis for the net zero aspect of it, and also just about the future of that sector.
So, in British Columbia, we have this regulation that requires the forest residues to be slash burned. And that burning does not happen very efficiently. So we actually get fairly significant methane and N2O emissions from burning that slash. So if we can take those forest residues and use them in a controlled manner to make RNG, we can actually get a net negative RNG out of that process. But even if we were to use mill residues, the emissions are probably on the order of 1/10 of what they would be for fossil natural gas.
So the life cycle analysis of that whole process would be net zero or negative? Is that?
From forest residues, it would be negative.
Right. And do you see this as something that Canada could develop as a future feedstock for our natural gas consumption, or will natural gas consumption decline, as we've just heard earlier in this hearing? I'm just wondering what the future of this is for the country and for the world, for that matter.
So we use an awful lot of natural gas, so I think it would take us quite some time to switch from forest residues to supply all of our fossil natural gas. There's actually been a request for proposals to do a study in BC to look at the market potential of RNG from all sources. But I don't believe that forest residues today, I don't believe there's enough of them to displace our current natural gas use.
Okay, if Mr. Wolynitz wants to jump in there and add anything.
Yeah, if you wanted to fully decarbonize your gas stream, there wouldn't be enough forestry residue. You'd have to reduce the amount of natural gas you're using, produce renewable natural gas from a variety of feedstocks, including forest residue, and likely supplement it with hydrogen.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. I appreciate that, and I appreciate everybody accommodating us on the time. If everybody could stick around just for 2 minutes, I just want to say thank you to the witnesses. That was a very interesting panel, to say the least, and incredibly informative, and we are all very grateful, so thank you. We are almost done this study, but if our panel members could, or our MPs could stick around just for a moment, our guests can leave. So just...
Thank you for having us.
Oh, our pleasure.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
A couple things real quick, guys. So Monday is our 8th and final meeting on this study. We're going to do 90 minutes with witnesses, and then we'll go on camera and do 30 minutes of drafting instructions. The revised agenda has just gone out within the last half hour. But having said that, I just want to say something quickly, because we are at the end of session. Things are moving and changing by the minute. I don't know what's going to happen on Monday. In the event that for some reason our meeting gets scuttled on Monday, I just want to say thank you to first all of the members of this committee. I can honestly say it's a real pleasure working with every one of you. We said at the outset that this committee works well together. It has proven to be true throughout. Even when we disagree, we do it respectfully. And I'm constantly reminded of this every time I go to another committee. So for that, I just want to say thank you to all of you. I also want to say thank you to all of the people who make these meetings happen, our translators, all of the staff, and our clerk and our analysts. Look, you guys hold all this together. we do a lot of talking with a lot of different ideas and different things, and you put it all together and make it work and make it run smoothly. And for that, we all owe you a deep debt of gratitude. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if I have an opportunity and we hear on Monday, I will say it again, but we do all appreciate it. So on that note, everybody, I hope to see you on Monday and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.
Mr. Chair, can
yes,
in addition to echoing all your thanks, do we need half an hour for instructions on Monday, or would 15 minutes suffice?
It probably would, and we can we can build in a safety valve. I mean, if we end up going a little bit over an hour and a half with the witnesses, there's always a bit of transition time between public to in camera. So, but it probably what it'll work out to closer to that, Craig.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hey, bon weekend tout le monde. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Go
Habs go.
Merci.
Go Habs go.
Everybody.
Go Habs go.
Go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.